The fluorescent lights of Rivera's garage hummed their familiar tune as Marcus Rivera wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, checking the wall clock for the third time in 10 minutes. 3:47 p.m. Tyler should have been home by now. The boy's routine was as predictable as the morning sunrise. School ended at 3:15, 20-minute walk home, backpack dropped by the front door with the casual disregard only teenagers could manage, followed by the inevitable raid of whatever leftovers occupied the refrigerator. Marcus had built his life around routines. 3 years of single parenthood had taught him that structure was the only thing standing between him and complete chaos. Wake at 5:30. Coffee black, no sugar. Check Tyler's room. Empty bed meant the boy had made it to school. Open the garage at 7:00 sharp. Work until 3, unless Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick decided to stage another mechanical rebellion. Close shop, pick up groceries if needed, home by 3:30 to intercept whatever crisis Tyler had manufactured during his school day. Today felt different. The October air carried an edge that had nothing to do with the changing seasons. Marcus's phone sat silent on his workbench, surrounded by scattered tools and the detritus of another 12-hour day. No texts from Tyler asking for money, no calls from school administrators reporting another incident involving his son's unfortunate tendency to speak truth to authority. The silence stretched like a held breath. Marcus Rivera had learned to read silence during his 8 years in Army signal intelligence. Radio static that meant enemy movement, dead air that preceded incoming artillery, the particular quality of quiet that soldiers recognized as the moment before everything went to hell. This silence felt familiar in all the wrong ways. He pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolled to Tyler's contact, and hit call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Tyler's voicemail kicked in, that slightly embarrassed teenager voice asking callers to leave a message, though he never bothered returning them. "Tyler, it's Dad. Call me when you get this." Dum. The words echoed in the empty garage, bouncing off concrete walls decorated with Elena's amateur photography and Tyler's elementary school artwork that Marcus had never found the heart to remove. His wife had insisted on making the garage feel like home. Despite Marcus's protests that customers didn't need to see finger paintings next to diagnostic equipment. Now those personal touches served as constant reminders of everything he'd lost and everything he still had left to lose. Marcus checked the time again. 3:52 p.m. Tyler was officially late. In the military, Marcus had been responsible for tracking enemy communications across hostile territory. He'd spent countless hours listening to intercepted phone calls, mapping digital footprints, building profiles of insurgent networks through their electronic signatures. The work required patience, attention to detail, and an almost supernatural ability to spot patterns in chaos. Those same skills had made him an exceptional mechanic. Every engine noise told a story, every diagnostic code revealed a hidden truth about what lay beneath the hood. Those same skills were now screaming at him that something was wrong. Marcus walked to the garage's front window and peered down Elm Street toward Westbrook High School. The afternoon crowd of teenagers had long since dispersed, leaving only empty sidewalks and the kind of suburban quiet that most people found peaceful. Marcus found it ominous. Tyler walked this route every day, usually with his earbuds in and his attention focused on whatever video game occupied his thoughts. The boy was a creature of habit, just like his father. The phone rang. Marcus snatched it up without checking the caller ID, expecting Tyler's voice with some breathless explanation about staying late for tutoring or getting distracted by friends. Instead, he heard the crisp, professional tone of Mrs. Patricia Donnelly, Tyler's English teacher. "Mr. Rivera, this is Mrs. Donnelly from Westbrook High. I'm calling because Tyler didn't come home with his carpool today, and the Morrison family is concerned." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Carpool? Tyler walks home. Oh, the pause stretched uncomfortably long. "I'm sorry. I must have been mistaken. I thought, well, the Morrisons said they were supposed to give Tyler a ride today." Something about his father working late? I never arranged any carpool. Tyler always walks home. Another pause. When Mrs. Donnelly spoke again, her voice carried a note of uncertainty that made Marcus's military instincts prick up like a dog hearing a distant alarm. Mr. Rivera, when was the last time you spoke with Tyler today? This morning, before school. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his keys from the workbench, mentally calculating how quickly he could lock up the garage and get to the school. Why? What happened? Well, that's just it. Tyler never showed up for 6th period English. I marked him absent, but I assumed he'd gone home sick or had a family emergency. But if you didn't pick him up, the cold feeling in Marcus's stomach crystallized into something sharper. Mrs. Donnelly, I need you to tell me exactly what happened today. Did anyone see Tyler after lunch? I'm not sure. Mr. Rivera, perhaps you should call the school office. They'll have better records of... No. The word came out harder than Marcus intended. I need you to think. Did Tyler seem upset about anything lately? Different in any way? Through the phone, Marcus could hear the rustle of papers, the distant sound of hallway conversations, the everyday noise of a school day winding down. Normal sounds that felt surreal, given the growing certainty that nothing about this day was normal. Actually, Mrs. Donnelly said slowly, Tyler has been asking a lot of questions lately about local government, police procedures, that sort of thing, for his research project, he said. But the questions were quite specific, almost like he was investigating something. Marcus stopped walking toward his truck. What kind of questions? Things like how evidence gets processed, what makes testimony admissible in court, how long records are kept by different agencies. I thought it was refreshing, actually. Most students do the bare minimum for research projects, but Tyler seemed genuinely curious about how the system works. How the system works. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet see beginning to shift into place. Tyler had been asking about evidence and court procedures. Tyler, who walked the same route home every day, who never missed family dinner, who texted his father about everything from pop quizzes to cafeteria food complaints. Tyler, who hadn't come home. Mrs. Donnelly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Has anyone from outside the school been showing unusual interest in Tyler? Anyone asking questions about him, his schedule, his habits? The silence stretched so long that Marcus thought the call had dropped. When Mrs. Donnelly spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Rivera, I think you should come to the school. Right now. There's something you need to see. Marcus was already in his truck, engine turning over with the reliable growl of a machine he'd personally rebuilt 3 times. I'm on my way. Don't let anyone leave. Don't call anyone else until I get there. Mr. Rivera, promise me, no calls to anyone until I arrive. I promise. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his truck for exactly 10 seconds, allowing himself that much time to acknowledge the fear clawing at his chest. 10 seconds to remember Elena's face the night before she died, when she tried to tell him something about the women's shelter where she volunteered, something about girls who went missing, and cases that never got investigated properly. 10 seconds to recall the way Tyler had been acting lately, quieter than usual, more secretive, spending long hours on his computer with the door closed. 10 seconds to realize that his son hadn't just failed to come home from school. His son had disappeared. Marcus Rivera had spent 8 years in military intelligence, learning how to hunt people who didn't want to be found. He'd tracked terrorist networks across 3 continents, mapped criminal organizations through their digital footprints, and built cases that put dangerous people in prison for life. Those skills had been dormant for years, buried under the routine demands of single parenthood and small business ownership. Today, those skills woke up. Marcus shifted his truck into drive and pulled onto Elm Street, heading toward Westbrook High School. In his mind, he was already building profiles, mapping possibilities, calculating odds. Someone had taken his son, someone who knew Tyler's schedule, his habits, his route home from school, Someone who felt confident enough to make a 16-year-old boy disappear in broad daylight from a suburban street. Someone who had made a very serious mistake. Because Marcus Rivera was no longer just a concerned father driving to his son's school. He was a trained intelligence operative with intimate knowledge of surveillance, tracking, and tactical response. He was a man with nothing left to lose and a very specific set of skills designed for finding people who didn't want to be found. Most importantly, he was a father whose child had been taken. And somewhere in this small Texas town, someone was about to discover exactly what that meant. 6 months earlier, Tyler Rivera had always been good with patterns. It was a trait he'd inherited from his father, along with Marcus's dark eyes and stubborn streak. Where his father saw mechanical problems in engine diagnostics, Tyler saw inconsistencies in human behavior. Where Marcus tracked down electrical faults through methodical testing, Tyler traced connections between seemingly unrelated events. The pattern started with Jessica Morales. Tyler first noticed her absence during third period biology. Jessica sat 2 seats ahead of him, close enough that he could smell her vanilla perfume and hear her quietly cursing at difficult equations. She was the kind of student who showed up every day, took meticulous notes, and actually raised her hand during class discussions. When her seat stayed empty for 3 consecutive days, Tyler asked Mr. Patterson where she'd gone. "Family emergency, Mr. Burr." Patterson had said, not looking up from his gradebook. "She'll be back soon." But Jessica never came back. Her locker remained untouched, her textbooks gathering dust in the classroom cubbies. When Tyler asked other teachers about her, he got the same response. "Family emergency. She'll be back soon. Don't worry about it." Tyler started worrying about it immediately. 2 weeks later, Kevin Santos disappeared from his engineering class. Same story. Family emergency. He'll be back soon. Kevin's absence was easier to overlook because he'd been struggling academically, cutting classes, running with a rougher crowd. The kind of kid teachers expected to drop out eventually. But Tyler remembered Kevin from middle school, remembered him as smart and funny before something had gone wrong at home. Then Maria Gonzalez stopped showing up to photography club. Then David Kim missed his presentation in AP history. Then Sarah Chen's mother called looking for her daughter, not realizing that Sarah hadn't been to school in 5 days. By Christmas break, Tyler had documented 7 missing students. 7 teenagers who had simply vanished from Westbrook High School with no forwarding address, no goodbye to friends, no mention in the local newspaper. 7 kids whose disappearances had been smoothly explained away by a school administration that seemed remarkably unconcerned about its shrinking enrollment. Tyler might have dismissed it as coincidence. After all, teenagers moved away, dropped out, transferred schools for legitimate reasons. But these weren't typical problem kids. These were students like Jessica, conscientious and involved, with friends and activities and reasons to stay. Students whose sudden departures left obvious holes in the social fabric of the school. Students whose families, Tyler discovered through careful social media investigation, weren't posting updates about relocations or new schools. Tyler began keeping a digital journal, using an encrypted app his father had shown him years earlier during one of Marcus's rare discussions about Army intelligence work. He documented names, dates, last known locations. He screenshotted social media profiles before they went dark. He mapped the missing students' schedules, looking for common teachers, shared activities, overlapping social circles. The pattern that emerged was subtle, but unmistakable. Someone was systematically targeting specific types of students. Not the obvious runaways or troublemakers, but kids who fit a particular profile. Kids who were smart enough to be useful, but vulnerable enough to be disposable. Kids with single parents or unstable home situations. Kids whose disappearances could be explained away without generating too much attention. Kids exactly like Tyler himself. Present day, Westbrook High School. Marcus Rivera parked his truck in the visitor space outside Westbrook High School and sat for a moment, studying the building that had swallowed his son somewhere between lunch and sixth period. The school looked exactly as it had during Tyler's freshman orientation 3 years ago. Red brick facade, manicured landscaping, motivational banners proclaiming academic excellence and character development. The kind of suburban high school that appeared in college brochures and real estate advertisements. Marcus had learned in the army that the most dangerous enemies were often hidden in plain sight. He found Mrs. Donnelly waiting in the main office, her usually composed demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. Patricia Donnelly was a woman in her 50s who took pride in running an orderly classroom and maintaining detailed records. Today, she looked like someone who had stumbled onto something she didn't understand and didn't want to be responsible for. "Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming so quickly." She glanced around the office nervously, noting the presence of the secretary and assistant principal. "Perhaps we could speak privately." Marcus followed her down a hallway lined with student artwork and college preparation posters. The building smelled like industrial disinfectant and teenage anxiety, a combination that brought back unwelcome memories of his own high school years. Mrs. Donnelly led him to an empty classroom and closed the door behind them. "I need to show you something," she said, moving to her desk and retrieving a manila folder. "After we spoke on the phone, I started thinking about Tyler's recent behavior, the questions he'd been asking. I decided to check his recent assignments." She handed Marcus a typed report, 10 pages long, titled Local Government Accountability and Missing Persons Cases, a Statistical Analysis. Tyler's name appeared in the header, along with the date, submitted just 2 weeks ago. Marcus scanned the first page, his military training automatically cataloging the key details. Tyler had researched missing persons reports in their county over the past 2 years. He'd cross-referenced those reports with school enrollment records, social media activity, and local news coverage. He'd identified patterns in the types of cases that received media attention versus those that were quietly closed without resolution. The data was meticulous. The analysis was sophisticated. The conclusions were terrifying. Tyler documented 17 missing teenagers in the past 18 months, Mrs. Donnelly said quietly. All from this school or the surrounding district, all fitting specific demographic profiles. All cases that were quickly resolved through official channels without any follow-up investigation. Marcus continued reading, recognizing his son's methodical approach to research. Tyler had learned to think systematically from watching his father diagnose mechanical problems. Start with the symptoms, gather data, look for patterns, test hypotheses. Applied to missing persons cases, that approach had led Tyler to some disturbing conclusions about how certain disappearances were being handled by local authorities. "Mrs. Donnelly, who else has seen this report? That's what worries me." Tyler was supposed to present it to the class next week, but he asked to present it early to a guest speaker instead, someone from local law enforcement who was visiting the school to talk about career opportunities. Marcus felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "When was this presentation?" "Yesterday, during lunch period. Tyler specifically requested to present to Detective Hutchins from the Sheriff's Department." The name hit Marcus like cold water. He'd heard of Raymond Hutchins through the small-town network of business owners and community members. Hutchins had a reputation as a dedicated officer, heavily involved in community outreach programs, particularly those focused on at-risk youth. The kind of cop who coached Little League and organized charity drives, whose photograph appeared regularly in the local newspaper, accepting community service awards. "Did you attend this presentation?" "No." Tyler asked to meet privately with Detective Hutchins, said he wanted to discuss potential career opportunities in law enforcement. Mrs. Donnelly paused, studying Marcus's face. "Mr. Rivera, after Tyler didn't show up for sixth period, I asked around. None of the other teachers saw him after lunch, and Detective Hutchins left the school immediately after their meeting. Drained. Marcus read through Tyler's conclusions again, paying closer attention to the specific cases his son had identified. The missing students weren't random disappearances. They formed a pattern that suggested systematic targeting by someone with inside knowledge of their personal situations. Someone who knew which kids had unstable home lives, which ones had single parents working multiple jobs, which ones wouldn't be immediately missed if they failed to come home from school. Someone who had access to detailed student records and family information. Someone in a position of authority who could deflect questions and discourage investigations. Mrs. Donnelly, I need you to think carefully. Has Detective Hutchins been involved with the school before? Any other visits? Any interactions with students who later went missing? She was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her mentally reviewing months of routine interactions, looking for patterns she'd previously dismissed as coincidence. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. He's been here regularly for the past 2 years, always very helpful, very community-minded. He runs a program called Youth Mentorship Initiative, pairs at-risk students with adult mentors for guidance and support. She paused. Mr. Rivera, I just realized something. Every single student on Tyler's list was part of that program. Marcus felt puzzle pieces clicking into place with the terrible precision of a well-designed trap. Tyler had stumbled onto something significant, something that connected missing teenagers to a police officer who specialized in working with vulnerable youth. Tyler had gathered evidence, built a case, and then presented his findings directly to the person he'd been investigating. His brilliant, methodical, trusting son had walked into a trap of his own making. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened Tyler's contact, but instead of calling, he selected Find My Phone, a feature he'd insisted on installing after Tyler lost his device twice in 1 month. The app took a moment to load, then displayed a map of the local area with a small blue dot indicating Tyler's location. The dot wasn't at home, it wasn't at school. It was stationary in an area Marcus didn't recognize. Somewhere on the industrial side of town, where abandoned warehouses and defunct manufacturing facilities created a landscape of forgotten buildings and empty lots. Mrs. Donnelly, I need to ask you to do something, and it's very important that you follow my instructions exactly. Marcus showed her the GPS location on his phone. I'm going to text you this address. If you don't hear from me within 2 hours, I want you to call the FBI field office in Dallas and ask to speak with someone about a missing child case involving police corruption. Don't call the local sheriff's department. Don't call anyone local. Do you understand? She nodded, though her face had gone pale. Marcus was already moving toward the door when she called after him. Mr. Rivera, what if Tyler really is just... My son researched 17 missing teenagers and presented his findings to a police officer who was directly involved with every single case. Marcus's voice carried the flat certainty of someone stating undeniable facts. Tyler didn't fail to come home from school, Mrs. Donnelly. Tyler was taken by someone who realized he knew too much. Marcus left Westbrook High School with Tyler's research report tucked inside his jacket and a growing understanding of exactly how much danger his son was in. As he drove toward the GPS coordinates, he mentally reviewed everything Tyler had documented, looking for details his son might have missed or implications the boy hadn't fully understood. Tyler had found the pattern. Tyler had built the case. Tyler had identified the person responsible for 17 missing teenagers. Now Marcus needed to find Tyler before his son became number 18. What caught your attention the most in this unfolding mystery? The systematic disappearances that everyone ignored, or the realization that Tyler had unknowingly presented his evidence to the very person he'd been investigating? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights might reveal details that even Marcus hasn't considered yet. The GPS coordinates led Marcus to a section of town he rarely visited, the industrial district where manufacturing jobs had died a slow death over the past decade, leaving behind empty warehouses and rusted chain-link fences. The October sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows between buildings that had once housed legitimate businesses, but now served as storage facilities for companies that preferred to keep their operations out of public view. Marcus parked his truck 2 blocks away from Tyler's last known location, relying on habits ingrained during 8 years of military intelligence work. Never drive directly to the target. Always maintain escape routes. Assume the enemy has better surveillance than you do. The enemy. Marcus found himself thinking in those terms again for the first time in years, his mind automatically shifting into the tactical mindset that had kept him alive in Afghanistan and Iraq. Someone had taken his son. Someone with resources, inside knowledge, and the authority to make problems disappear. That made them an enemy combatant in a war Marcus hadn't known he was fighting. Tyler's phone signal originated from a grey cinder-block building wedged between an auto parts warehouse and a defunct textile factory. The building had no visible signage, no indication of what business might operate inside its windowless walls. 3 vehicles sat in the small parking lot, a sheriff's department cruiser, a black SUV with tinted windows, and a white panel van that looked like it had seen better decades. Marcus circled the building on foot, noting security cameras, exit points, and sight lines. The warehouse had 2 entrances, a main door facing the parking lot and a loading dock in the rear that appeared to be sealed shut. The security cameras were professional grade, the kind of equipment that suggested serious money behind whatever operation was happening inside. As he completed his reconnaissance, Marcus heard voices coming from the main entrance. He pressed himself against the corner of the building and listened. Told you this was getting too risky. Kid was smart, smarter than the others. Should have handled this differently. Marcus recognized the second voice immediately. Detective Raymond Hutchins, though his tone was very different from the community-minded public servant who appeared in newspaper photographs. This voice carried the sharp edge of someone under pressure, someone whose carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. "We handle it the way we always handle it," came a woman's reply. Marcus didn't recognize her voice, but her tone suggested authority. Someone used to giving orders and having them followed. The boy disappears, just like the others. Father gets told there's no evidence of foul play. Case gets closed quietly. "This is different," Hutchins insisted. "The father's got military background, intelligence training. He's not going to just accept that his kid ran away. Then we make sure the father has bigger problems to worry about." Marcus felt ice form in his veins. Tyler wasn't just missing. His son was being held by people who had already decided how this situation would end. People who saw Marcus as a potential threat to be eliminated rather than a grieving father to be placated. Marcus pulled out his phone and began recording, using a technique he'd learned for gathering intelligence in hostile territory. The audio might not be admissible in court, but it would provide evidence of conspiracy and intent. More importantly, it would give him leverage. "The shipment leaves tomorrow night," the woman continued. "The Rivera boy goes with it. By the time his father stops looking locally, the trail will be cold. We've done this 17 times without problems. One concerned parent isn't going to change our procedures. What about the research he did? The kid had names, dates, connections. What if he shared that information with someone?" "He shared it with you," the woman said, and Marcus could hear the amusement in her voice. The trusted police officer who was going to help him bring justice to all those missing children. The boy thought he was being a hero. Marcus forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at him to kick down the door and find Tyler. But tactical intelligence was useless without tactical advantage. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and operating on enemy territory. His son's life depended on Marcus making smart decisions, not emotional ones. "Rivera's probably already called other police," Hutchins said. "What if he contacts the FBI? Let him. By the time federal agents get involved, this facility will be empty, and your local department will have a perfectly reasonable explanation for why they couldn't locate a runaway teenager. You've been building this cover story for 2 years, Ray. Time to trust the system you created." The conversation continued, but Marcus had heard enough to understand the scope of what Tyler had stumbled into. This wasn't just about missing teenagers. This was about an organized trafficking operation with police protection and federal-level cover. Tyler's research had identified the tip of an iceberg that disappeared far below the surface. Marcus retreated to his truck and sat in the gathering darkness, forcing himself to think strategically rather than emotionally. 17 missing teenagers, a police detective providing inside protection, a sophisticated operation with enough resources to maintain a permanent facility and coordinated transportation. This wasn't a local crime that could be handled by local authorities. This required federal intervention. Marcus scrolled through his phone contacts until he found a number he hadn't called in 3 years. Special Agent Diana Reyes, FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, Dallas Field Office. Marcus had worked with Reyes during his final military deployment, providing intelligence support for a joint task force targeting terrorist financing networks. She'd told him to call if he ever needed federal assistance with anything, though he'd never imagined taking her up on that offer. The phone rang twice before Reyes answered. "Marcus Rivera, this is unexpected. Diana, I need help. My 16-year-old son is missing and local police are involved." The line was quiet for several seconds. When Reyes spoke again, her voice carried the sharp focus of an agent who'd just shifted into work mode. "Details, everything, now." Marcus gave her the condensed version: Tyler's research into missing teenagers, his presentation to Detective Hutchins, his failure to come home from school, the GPS trail leading to an industrial facility with police vehicles on site. He read key sections from Tyler's report, highlighting the pattern of disappearances and the common connection to Hutchins's youth mentorship program. "You said you have audio recordings?" Partial conversation between Hutchins and an unidentified woman. They're discussing Tyler's disappearance as part of an ongoing trafficking operation. They mentioned a shipment leaving tomorrow night. "Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. What you're describing sounds like a significant criminal enterprise with law enforcement corruption. This isn't something you can handle alone, and it's not something we can resolve through normal channels. What are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that if your son is being held by the people you've described, his life is in immediate danger. But I'm also telling you that any attempt to extract him without proper support will likely get both of you killed." Marcus stared at the warehouse where his son was being held, watching shadows move behind the windows of the main office. Tyler was less than 200 yards away, but he might as well have been on another continent. "How long for federal response?" "Full tactical team, coordination with local FBI, proper warrants and jurisdiction clearance, 8 to 12 hours minimum. They said the shipment leaves tomorrow night. If Tyler's part of that shipment, I know." Reyes's voice was grim. "Marcus, I'm going to ask you to do something that goes against every instinct you have as a father. I need you to maintain surveillance, but not attempt rescue. I need you to be my eyes on the ground while I coordinate a federal response. And if they move Tyler before your people arrive, then we track them. But if you go in there alone, you're not just risking your own life. You're risking the investigation that could shut down this entire operation and save other kids who are still out there." Marcus understood the logic. He also understood that federal agents didn't have children being held by human traffickers. "Diana, I'm going to follow your advice, but I need you to understand something. If they try to move my son before your people arrive, I'm going to stop them, whatever it takes." "Marcus, I'm not negotiating. I'm informing. Tyler's my son, and I'm not letting him disappear into some trafficking network while we wait for proper jurisdiction clearance." The line was quiet for a long moment. When Reyes spoke again, her voice carried the tone of someone who'd just made a decision that would probably end up in her personnel file. "Maintain visual surveillance. Document everything you see: vehicles, personnel, timing of activities. Text me updates every 30 minutes. If they attempt to move your son, call me immediately before taking any action. And then? and then we'll improvise." Marcus ended the call and settled in for a long night of surveillance. He'd positioned his truck where he could observe both entrances to the warehouse while remaining concealed behind a defunct gas station. The October air was cold enough to require a jacket, but not cold enough to explain the chill that had settled in his bones. Tyler was alive. The conversation he'd overheard confirmed that his son was being held rather than killed, though Marcus took no comfort from that distinction. Tyler was alive because he was valuable as cargo, not because his captors had any interest in preserving his well-being. Marcus pulled up Tyler's research report on his phone and read through it again, this time looking for operational details rather than statistical analysis. His son had done remarkable work identifying the pattern of disappearances, but Tyler was 16 and brilliant rather than 16, and trained in tactical intelligence. There were gaps in his analysis, assumptions that revealed Tyler's fundamental faith in the system he'd been taught to trust. Tyler had assumed that police corruption was the exception rather than the rule. Tyler had assumed that presenting evidence to authority figures would result in justice rather than retaliation. Tyler had assumed that his father's military background and the family's stable community connections would provide protection against the kind of evil that typically targeted more vulnerable families. Tyler had been wrong on all counts. Marcus checked the time. 6:47 p.m. Tyler had been missing for approximately 4 hours. In intelligence work, the first 24 hours were critical. After that, trails went cold and opportunities for rescue decreased exponentially. Marcus had perhaps 18 hours to either coordinate a successful federal intervention or take direct action himself. His phone vibrated with a text from Diana Reyes. "Tactical team assembling. ETA 0600 tomorrow. Maintain position and keep reporting." Marcus responded, "Copy. Continuous surveillance maintained." What he didn't add was that 0600 tomorrow was 11 hours away, and the conversation he'd overheard suggested Tyler's captors might not wait that long to move their operation. Marcus Rivera settled deeper into his truck's driver's seat and began the kind of patient surveillance work that had once been his military specialty. He would watch, document, and wait for either federal backup or a clear opportunity to act alone. But one way or another, Tyler Rivera would be coming home. The tension is building as Marcus faces an impossible choice between waiting for proper backup and risking everything to save his son immediately. Like and subscribe to follow this story to its conclusion, because what happens next will determine whether justice prevails or whether this trafficking ring claims another victim. What would you do in Marcus's position? Let us know in the comments below. Marcus had been conducting surveillance for 4 hours when the first FBI vehicle arrived at his position. He watched through his side mirror as a black sedan pulled up behind his truck, followed by a second vehicle carrying tactical equipment. Special Agent Diana Reyes stepped out of the lead car, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who'd spent the drive from Dallas reviewing case files and coordinating with multiple agencies. Marcus climbed out of his truck to meet her, noting how Reyes automatically positioned herself to maintain visual contact with the warehouse while they spoke. She changed since their last meeting 3 years ago. Sharper suit, grayer hair, the kind of focused intensity that came from years of hunting human predators. "Status report," Reyes said without preamble. "Target location confirmed active. I've documented 6 individuals entering and leaving the facility over the past 4 hours, 3 law enforcement vehicles, 2 civilian cars, 1 commercial van. The pattern suggests shift changes every 2 hours, with consistent presence of at least 4 personnel on site." Marcus handed her a small notebook filled with license plate numbers, physical descriptions, and timestamps. "Military habits died hard. Document everything, assume nothing. Verify all intelligence through multiple sources. Any visual confirmation of your son? Negative. All personnel movement has been through the main entrance. No view of interior operations." Marcus paused, studying Reyes's expression. "Diana, how much support do you have for this operation?" "More than you might expect. Less than I'd prefer. She gestured toward the tactical team preparing equipment at their vehicle. The trafficking aspect gives us federal jurisdiction, but the police corruption complicates everything. We can't coordinate with local law enforcement without risking compromise. A third vehicle arrived, an unmarked van filled with surveillance equipment that Marcus recognized from his military intelligence days. 2 agents began setting up monitoring gear, while a third established encrypted communication links with FBI headquarters. This was becoming a significant federal operation, the kind that would generate paperwork for months and congressional oversight if anything went wrong. Marcus, I need to brief you on what we've discovered since our phone call. Reyes opened a tablet and showed him aerial photographs of the warehouse district. This facility isn't random. It's part of a network that spans 3 states with connections to international trafficking organizations. Your son didn't stumble onto a local crime. He uncovered a major component of a much larger operation. The photographs showed thermal imaging of multiple buildings in the industrial district, with heat signatures indicating human presence in locations that should have been abandoned. Red markers indicated suspected trafficking facilities, while blue markers showed legitimate businesses that might be providing cover for illegal operations. How long has this been operating? Based on your son's research and our own ongoing investigation, at least 3 years, possibly longer. Reyes swiped to another screen showing financial records and communication intercepts. Detective Hutchins isn't running this operation. He's middle management. The real authority is someone with access to federal databases, international transportation networks, and enough political protection to operate openly. Marcus felt the scope of Tyler's discovery expanding in ways that made his own military intelligence work seem simple by comparison. Enemy combatants in Afghanistan had been easier to identify than criminals who operated with badges and legal authority. Who's in charge? We're still working on that, but whoever it is has been very careful about maintaining operational security. Your son's research was actually more comprehensive than some of our own intelligence gathering. Reyes showed him another screen displaying Tyler's statistical analysis overlaid with FBI data. The boy identified patterns we hadn't noticed. Marcus studied the comparison, noting how Tyler's academic research had filled gaps in federal intelligence. His 16-year-old son had solved pieces of a puzzle that professional investigators had been working on for months. Pride mixed with terror as Marcus realized exactly how dangerous Tyler's discoveries had been to people with resources and motivation to eliminate threats. Diana, I need you to understand something. Tyler didn't just research missing teenagers for a school project. He was investigating his mother's death. Reyes stopped scrolling through data and looked at Marcus directly. Explain. Elena Rivera died 3 years ago, officially from cancer, but Tyler believed she was murdered to prevent her from exposing this trafficking network. Elena volunteered at a women's shelter that worked with young victims. Tyler thinks she discovered connections between the shelter and missing persons cases. Udun, do you have evidence supporting that theory? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Reyes several screenshots from Tyler's encrypted files. Tyler documented Elena's work schedule at the shelter, cross-referenced it with missing persons reports, and identified correlations between her volunteer shifts and subsequent disappearances. He believed Elena was killed because she was about to report what she'd discovered. Reyes studied the phone screen, her expression growing more grim with each piece of evidence. Marcus, if your son is right about his mother's death, then this operation has been eliminating witnesses for years. That changes the risk profile significantly. Meaning? Meaning Tyler isn't just a witness who stumbled onto criminal activity. He's the son of a previous victim who was conducting his own investigation. That makes him an active threat rather than a passive liability. Marcus understood the implications immediately. Tyler wasn't being held as random cargo. He was being held by people who knew exactly who he was and what he represented. People who had already killed his mother and were prepared to kill him to protect their operation. How long until your tactical team is ready to move? Reyes checked her watch. Full deployment at 600. But Marcus, based on what you've just told me, I don't think we can wait that long. As if summoned by her words, Marcus's phone vibrated with an emergency alert. He checked the screen and felt his blood turn to ice water. Tyler's GPS signal had just started moving. They're transporting him. Right now. Reyes immediately activated her tactical radio. All units, target is mobile. Repeat, package is being moved from primary location. Marcus was already moving toward his truck when Reyes grabbed his arm. You're not going alone. Diana, that's my son. That's exactly why you're not going alone. She gestured toward the tactical team, who were already loading equipment and preparing for mobile surveillance. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. Marcus studied her face and saw the kind of determination that had made Diana Reyes one of the FBI's most effective violent crimes investigators. She wasn't just following procedure. She was making a personal commitment to bringing Tyler home safely. What's the plan? Mobile surveillance, until we can determine destination and assess tactical options. If they're moving your son to a secondary location, we want to catch them in transit, rather than fighting them on ground they've chosen. The FBI vehicles were already in motion, with Marcus's truck integrated into a convoy that would have looked like random traffic to casual observation. Marcus found himself following federal protocols he hadn't used since his military service, coordinating with multiple agencies through encrypted communications while maintaining surveillance on a target that contained the most important thing in his world. Tyler's GPS signal was moving south on Industrial Boulevard, heading toward the highway that connected their small town to larger metropolitan areas. If Tyler reached that highway, he could disappear into a network of safe houses and transportation hubs that spanned multiple states. This might be Marcus's only opportunity to intercept the operation while Tyler was still within reach. "Contact," came the radio voice of the lead surveillance vehicle. "Visual on target convoy. 3 vehicles traveling in formation. Black SUV, white panel van, sheriff's department vehicle providing escort." Marcus felt sick recognition wash over him. Detective Hutchins was personally involved in transporting Tyler, using his official authority to provide cover for human trafficking. The very person who should have been protecting Tyler was delivering him to whoever had ordered his disappearance. "All units, maintain distance. Do not engage until we have clear tactical advantage." Marcus keyed his radio. "Diana, they're heading toward the highway. Once they reach interstate access, we lose them." "Understood. But if we move too early, we risk your son's safety. These people have killed before. They won't hesitate to eliminate a witness if they feel cornered." The convoy ahead of them signaled for a right turn onto Highway 6, the main route toward Dallas and points beyond. Marcus watched Tyler's GPS dot moving farther from home with each passing second, carrying his son toward a fate that Marcus couldn't allow himself to contemplate. "Diana, I know. If we're going to stop them, it has to be now." Doppo. Special Agent Diana Reyes studied the tactical display on her tablet, calculating odds and assessing options with the cold precision that had made her career in violent crimes investigation. 3 vehicles carrying unknown numbers of armed individuals, at least 1 police officer providing official cover, traveling toward federal highways, with a 16-year-old hostage who represented a critical threat to a major criminal organization. The smart play was to follow them, gather intelligence, coordinate with other agencies, and plan a rescue operation with overwhelming tactical advantage. The safe play was to prioritize officer safety and federal authority over immediate action. The right play was to stop them before Tyler Rivera disappeared forever. "All units, prepare for vehicle interdiction. Target convoy will be stopped before reaching highway access." Marcus keyed his radio with hands that were finally steady for the first time in 8 hours. "Copy. Standing by for tactical coordination." Tyler was about to be rescued by federal agents, or Marcus was about to watch his son disappear into a trafficking network that had already claimed 17 other teenagers. Either way, the waiting was over. The interdiction happened at the intersection of Industrial Boulevard and Highway 6, where a traffic light provided the tactical opportunity Agent Reyes had been waiting for. As the convoy carrying Tyler approached the red light, FBI vehicles moved into position with the precision of a military operation. Marcus watched from his designated position as federal agents surrounded the three-vehicle convoy. The lead SUV found itself blocked by an FBI sedan that had appeared from a side street. The panel van was boxed in by tactical vehicles fore and aft. Detective Hutchins's patrol car was isolated by agents who approached with weapons drawn and federal authority that superseded any local police protocols. FBI, vehicle stopped. Driver, exit your vehicle with hands visible. Marcus saw Hutchins emerge from his patrol car with his hands raised, but the detective's face showed calculation rather than surprise. This was a man who had prepared for the possibility of federal intervention, someone who had contingency plans and legal strategies ready for deployment. The occupants of the SUV and panel van were less prepared. Marcus counted 4 additional individuals taken into custody, 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed in civilian clothes that suggested professional rather than street-level criminal activity. These weren't random thugs hired for a quick job. These were people who operated with resources and organizational backing. "Package located," came the radio call that made Marcus's heart restart. "Subject is alive and responsive." Marcus was moving toward the van before Agent Reyes could stop him, his parental instincts overriding years of tactical training. He reached the rear of the panel van just as FBI agents were opening the cargo doors, revealing Tyler bound with zip ties, but otherwise apparently unharmed. "Dad?" Tyler's voice was hoarse but steady, carrying the kind of relief that only came from seeing rescue arrive, just when hope was beginning to fade. "I'm here." Marcus climbed into the van to help cut Tyler's restraints, noting that his son had been secured, but not brutalized, professional restraint rather than sadistic violence. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared." Tyler rubbed circulation back into his wrists as the zip ties came off. "Dad, they killed Mom. I was right about everything." Marcus helped Tyler out of the van and into the protective custody of FBI agents, who immediately began medical evaluation and evidence collection. Tyler was alive, safe, and able to provide testimony about his captivity. But Marcus could see in his son's eyes that Tyler had learned things during his hours in captivity, things that would change how the boy understood the world around him. Agent Reyes approached as Tyler was being checked by EMTs. "Marcus, we need to debrief your son as soon as medical clears him. What he observed during captivity could be crucial for prosecution." "What about the arrests? How much evidence do you have?" "Enough to hold them while we build the larger case. But Tyler's testimony could be what connects this local operation to the federal trafficking network." She paused, studying Tyler as he answered questions from FBI agents. "Your son is remarkably composed for what he's been through." Marcus looked at Tyler and saw not just his 16-year-old boy, but a young man who had spent months investigating a criminal conspiracy that had killed his mother and targeted his community. Tyler had prepared for this confrontation in ways that Marcus was only beginning to understand. "Agent Reyes," Tyler called out, interrupting his medical examination. "I need to show you something. They don't know I recorded everything." Tyler pulled a small device from his shoe, a digital recorder that Marcus recognized as military surplus equipment from his own collection of intelligence gear. Tyler had been conducting his own evidence-gathering operation from the moment he'd been taken captive. "I recorded their conversations for the past 6 hours. Tyler said, handing the device to Reyes. "Names, locations, financial details, transportation schedules, everything they discussed while they thought I was just a scared kid." Reyes accepted the recorder with the kind of reverence usually reserved for holy relics. "Tyler, what exactly did you hear?" "Detective Hutchins isn't in charge. He's working for someone named Morrison, a woman with federal connections who runs operations across multiple states. They've been using the school's youth mentorship program to identify vulnerable targets, then using Hutchins's police authority to cover disappearances. Tyler continued his debriefing with the systematic approach Marcus recognized from his own intelligence training. The boy had been listening, analyzing and documenting even while bound in the back of a van, gathering evidence that would be crucial for prosecuting the entire network. They mentioned shipping schedules, financial accounts, and something called Project Sanctuary, a federal program that's supposed to help missing children but is actually being used to transport trafficking victims across state lines. Agent Reyes was taking notes rapidly, recognizing the significance of what Tyler had uncovered. Did they mention specific federal officials? Anyone with oversight authority for missing persons cases? Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Morrison. She runs the Regional Task Force for Missing and Exploited Children. According to what I heard, she's been using federal resources to facilitate trafficking operations while officially investigating missing persons cases. Marcus felt pieces of a massive puzzle clicking into place. Tyler hadn't just uncovered local corruption, he'd identified federal officials who were using their authority to enable human trafficking. The scope of the conspiracy explained how 17 teenagers could disappear without generating meaningful investigation. Tyler, did they say anything about your mother's death? Tyler's composure faltered for the first time since his rescue. Mom discovered the connection between the women's shelter and missing persons cases. She was going to report it to federal authorities, but she contacted Deputy Marshal Morrison instead of the FBI. Morrison arranged for Mom to be poisoned with something that mimicked cancer progression. The revelation hit Marcus like physical violence. Eleanor hadn't died from cancer relapse. She'd been murdered by federal officials who were supposed to protect people like her. Tyler had been investigating his mother's murder for months, gathering evidence that his parents had been targeted by the very system they'd trusted for protection. Agent Reyes completed her preliminary interview with Tyler and pulled Marcus aside for private consultation. Marcus, what your son has uncovered is bigger than a local trafficking ring. This is systemic corruption involving federal law enforcement with potential connections to international criminal organizations. What does that mean for Tyler's safety? It means he's now a key federal witness in a case that could bring down officials with significant power and resources. It also means the people who killed your wife and tried to kidnap your son have connections we're still trying to identify. Marcus studied the activity around the arrest scene. FBI agents securing evidence, local officials being excluded from the investigation, federal prosecutors being briefed by encrypted phone calls. Tyler's research project had evolved into a federal case that would likely generate headlines and congressional oversight. How long before this goes public? Depends on how quickly we can identify and arrest the federal officials involved. Deputy Marshal Morrison is already under surveillance, but if she realizes we've compromised her operation, she might disappear or eliminate evidence. Tyler rejoined them, having completed his medical examination and initial evidence statement. Agent Reyes, there's something else you need to know. While I was in that warehouse, I saw files on dozens of other missing kids. Not just from our school district, but from across Texas and Oklahoma. This network has been operating for years. Did you see the files directly? I memorized as many names as I could. Tyler pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. I've been documenting everything since they took me. Names, dates, locations, financial account numbers I overheard them discussing. Marcus looked at his son with a mixture of pride and terror. Tyler had conducted himself like a trained intelligence operative during his captivity, gathering evidence and maintaining operational security even while his life was in danger. But Tyler was also 16 years old, and he'd just become the primary witness in a federal case that involved people willing to commit murder to protect their operation. Tyler, I need you to understand something, Agent Reyes said. What you've discovered and documented could save dozens of other children who are still missing, but it also makes you a target for people with significant resources and federal law enforcement connections. What kind of protection can you provide? Marcus asked. Full federal witness protection if necessary. But first we need to use Tyler's evidence to move quickly against the people he's identified. Every hour we delay gives them more opportunity to destroy evidence or eliminate other witnesses. Tyler looked between his father and Agent Reyes with the kind of determined expression Marcus had seen on Elena's face when she'd made difficult decisions about volunteer work at the women's shelter. "I want to help catch the people who killed my mother," Tyler said. "Whatever it takes." Marcus felt pride and fear in equal measure. His son had inherited Elena's courage and Marcus's analytical abilities, but Tyler was still a teenager who was volunteering to remain in danger in order to ensure justice was served. "What's the next step?" Marcus asked. Agent Reyes checked her secure phone and showed them a message from FBI headquarters. "We've been authorized to conduct coordinated arrests across 3 states, based on Tyler's evidence and testimony. But we need Tyler to remain available for additional questioning as we identify more suspects." "How long?" "Could be days, could be weeks. This network appears to have connections we're still discovering." Marcus looked at Tyler and saw his own determination reflected in his son's expression. They'd started this day as a mechanic and a high school student whose biggest concerns were work schedules and homework assignments. Now they were federal witnesses in a case that could expose corruption, reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement. Tyler had found the evidence, Marcus had conducted the surveillance, FBI agents had made the arrests, but the real work of bringing justice for Elena Rivera and 17 missing teenagers was just beginning. And somewhere in federal law enforcement, Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Morrison was realizing that her carefully constructed criminal empire was about to collapse around the testimony of a 16-year-old boy who'd refused to disappear quietly. Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Morrison was in her Dallas office reviewing quarterly reports when the secure phone call came in that would end her career and likely her freedom. She'd built a reputation over 15 years as a dedicated federal agent specializing in missing and exploited children cases, with commendations from 3 different directors and a spotless service record that included successful prosecution of dozens of trafficking operations, none of which would matter once the FBI finished analyzing Tyler Rivera's recordings. "Ma'am, we have a problem," came Detective Hutchins' voice through the encrypted line. Morrison could hear stress fractures in his tone that suggested their carefully constructed operation was experiencing significant structural failure. "Define problem, Detective." The Rivera boy wasn't just a random target. He's been conducting sophisticated intelligence gathering for months. He documented our entire operation and recorded everything while in custody. FBI has him now, along with financial records, transportation schedules, and enough evidence to connect our local operations to your federal oversight. Morrison set down her coffee cup with deliberate care, her mind automatically shifting into damage control mode. 15 years of running dual operations, legitimate federal law enforcement and criminal trafficking networks, had taught her to plan for multiple contingency scenarios. The Rivera situation wasn't ideal, but it wasn't necessarily catastrophic if handled correctly. "What's the scope of federal involvement?" "Full task force deployment. Agent Diana Reyes from Violent Crimes is coordinating with headquarters. They've already arrested 6 people and seized our primary facility. Morrison, they know about Project Sanctuary." That changed everything. Project Sanctuary was Morrison's masterpiece, a legitimate federal program designed to provide safe transportation for child victims that she'd corrupted into a trafficking pipeline spanning multiple states. The program had federal funding, congressional oversight, and enough bureaucratic complexity that its misuse had been nearly impossible to detect. Nearly impossible, until a 16-year-old boy with his father's intelligence training and his mother's investigative instincts had connected patterns that federal auditors had missed for 3 years. Detective, I need you to listen carefully. Destroy all local records immediately. Eliminate any evidence connecting local operations to federal oversight. Claim that you were conducting an undercover investigation into suspected trafficking and that your involvement was part of a long-term federal operation. What about the financial accounts? The boy recorded account numbers and routing information. Morrison closed her eyes and calculated the odds of containing this exposure through traditional cover-up methods. Tyler Rivera had documented financial connections between local operations and federal programs that would be nearly impossible to explain away. Worse, the boy had identified Morrison by name and federal title, making it impossible to claim ignorance or distance from criminal activity. New plan, Morrison said. I want you to arrange for the Rivera boy and his father to have an accident. Make it look like they were fleeing federal custody and died in a vehicle collision. Without their testimony, the FBI has financial records and circumstantial evidence, but no direct witnesses to federal involvement. The line was quiet for several seconds before Hutchins responded. Ma'am, that's not a local police operation. That's eliminating federal witnesses under FBI protection. That's survival, detective. Your choice is simple. Eliminate the witnesses or spend the rest of your life in federal prison while I arrange for your family to experience unfortunate accidents that can't be traced back to official channels. Morrison ended the call and immediately activated protocols she'd hoped never to use. Emergency communication networks designed for catastrophic exposure, financial accounts established in countries without extradition treaties. Transportation resources that could move her outside federal jurisdiction within 6 hours. But first, she needed to buy time by eliminating the primary threats to her operation. Morrison accessed her secure federal database and located the current status of Tyler and Marcus Rivera. FBI protective custody, debriefing facility in Dallas, scheduled for additional testimony over the next 72 hours. The facility was federal property with multiple security protocols, but Morrison had administrative access to security systems and personnel schedules. More importantly, Morrison had authority to issue federal transportation orders that could move protected witnesses to different facilities for legitimate operational reasons. FBI debriefing facility. Dallas. Marcus Rivera sat in a sterile conference room, watching his son provide detailed testimony to FBI agents who were documenting every aspect of Tyler's investigation and captivity. Tyler had been talking for 4 hours, systematically reviewing months of research with the kind of methodical precision that reminded Marcus of his own military debriefings. Tyler wasn't just recounting what he'd discovered. He was building a prosecutorial roadmap that federal agents could use to dismantle an entire criminal network. Tyler, let's review the financial information you documented, Agent Reyes said, showing him a series of bank records displayed on her laptop. Can you identify which accounts you heard discussed during your captivity? Tyler studied the screen and pointed to several entries. Those 3 accounts were mentioned specifically. They said money from merchandise sales was distributed through those accounts to different operational cells. The woman they called Morrison talked about quarterly distributions that coincided with federal budget allocations. Marcus watched FBI agents exchange glances that suggested Tyler's testimony was confirming intelligence they'd gathered from other sources. Tyler wasn't just providing evidence. He was validating a federal investigation that had likely been developing for months or years. Agent Reyes received a secure message on her phone and frowned. Marcus, Tyler, I need to inform you that we've received orders to transfer you to a more secure facility for extended debriefing. Additional federal agencies want to interview Tyler about connections to other ongoing investigations. What kind of other investigations? Marcus asked. Your son's research has identified patterns that connect to missing persons cases in Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arkansas. Federal prosecutors want comprehensive testimony before proceeding with arrests in other states. Tyler looked at his father with an expression that suggested the 16-year-old was beginning to understand the scope of what he'd uncovered. How many other kids are we talking about? Potentially dozens. Your investigation identified a network that's been operating across multiple states for several years. What happened to you and your family wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic criminal enterprise. Marcus felt the weight of that revelation settle over him like a heavy coat. Elena's death hadn't been random bad luck or medical misfortune. Tyler's near disappearance hadn't been a single criminal act. They'd been targeted by a network that had likely destroyed dozens of other families with the same calculated precision. When do we transfer? Marcus asked. Immediately. Federal marshals are coordinating transportation to ensure your safety during the move. Marcus noted that Agent Reyes seemed less comfortable with this development than she should have been if it represented routine federal procedure. Something in her expression suggested concern about protocols she couldn't openly discuss. Diana, is there something you're not telling us? Standard security protocols require that I can't discuss all aspects of witness protection operations. But Marcus, I want you to stay alert during the transfer. If anything seems irregular, contact me immediately. She handed Marcus a card with a phone number written in pencil rather than printed. Personal contact information that bypassed official FBI channels. 20 minutes later, Marcus and Tyler were escorted to an unmarked federal vehicle by 2 U.S. Marshals who presented appropriate credentials and transfer authorization. The Marshals were professional and courteous, following standard protocols for moving protected witnesses between secure facilities. Marcus had no reason to suspect that one of the marshals was receiving encrypted communications from Deputy Marshal Sarah Morrison, or that their destination wasn't the secure facility listed in the official transfer orders. Tyler sat in the back seat reviewing his notes from the FBI debriefing, still processing the scope of the criminal network he'd exposed. Dad, do you think we're really going to be able to stop these people? Marcus studied the landscape passing outside their vehicle. Suburban Dallas, transitioning to rural Texas, heading toward what the marshals had described as a more secure federal facility outside the city. Tyler, what you discovered and documented is going to save other kids who are still missing. That's what matters. But what about the federal officials who are involved? Can they really prosecute people in their own system? It was a sophisticated question from a teenager who'd spent the past 6 months learning that authority figures weren't automatically trustworthy. Tyler had discovered that the very people charged with protecting missing children were the ones responsible for making them disappear. That's what the FBI is for, Marcus said. Federal agents who investigate corruption in other federal agencies. What about corruption in the FBI? Marcus didn't have a good answer for that question. Tyler's investigation had revealed corruption reaching into federal law enforcement at levels that suggested systematic rather than isolated criminal activity. If Deputy Marshal Morrison could coordinate trafficking operations for 3 years without detection, how many other federal officials might be involved? The vehicle turned off the main highway onto a rural road that Marcus didn't recognize from their route briefing. He caught the attention of the marshal in the passenger seat. "Excuse me, is this the correct route? I thought the facility was closer to the city." "Alternate route for security purposes, sir. Standard procedure when transporting high-value witnesses." Marcus felt his military instincts activate like an early warning system. The marshal's answer was technically reasonable, but something in the man's tone suggested rehearsed rather than spontaneous response. Marcus mentally catalogued details he could observe without appearing suspicious. Road markers, timestamps, cell phone signal strength. Tyler noticed his father's increased attention and immediately became more alert himself. 6 months of investigating criminal conspiracies had taught Tyler to recognize when situations weren't developing according to plan. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, "my phone doesn't have signal anymore." Marcus checked his own phone and confirmed Tyler's observation. They were in an area with no cellular coverage, traveling on rural roads toward a destination that neither of them could verify independently. Marcus pulled out the card Agent Reyes had given him and saw that attempting to contact her would be impossible without cell signal. They were effectively isolated with 2 federal marshals who might or might not be legitimate, traveling toward a facility that might or might not exist. For the second time in 24 hours, Marcus Rivera found himself planning tactical options for protecting his son from people who carried federal authority and operated within the legal system that was supposed to ensure justice. The difference was that this time, Marcus was prepared to act before Tyler disappeared. Marcus Rivera had learned patience during 8 years of military intelligence work, but he'd also learned to recognize when patience became liability. The federal vehicle carrying him and Tyler had been traveling rural roads for 45 minutes without cell signal, heading toward a destination that the marshals couldn't precisely describe when pressed for details. That was when Marcus decided the situation required immediate tactical intervention. "Tyler," he said quietly, "do you remember what I taught you about emergency communication protocols?" Tyler nodded slightly, understanding that his father was asking about procedures they'd practiced, but hoped never to use. Marcus had insisted on teaching Tyler basic survival techniques after Elena's death, not out of paranoia, but from recognition that a single parent needed backup plans for protecting his child. "Good. When I give the signal, activate the emergency beacon and prepare for evasive action." The emergency beacon was a small GPS transmitter Marcus had given Tyler for hiking trips, with one important modification. It broadcast on military frequencies that would be monitored by multiple agencies simultaneously. If activated, the beacon would bring everything from local police to federal task forces to their location within minutes. Marcus caught the driver's attention in the rearview mirror. "Marshal, I need to stop for a restroom break. My son is diabetic and needs to check his blood sugar." The driver exchanged glances with his partner before responding. "Sir, we're only 20 minutes from the facility. Medical personnel there can assist with any health concerns." "It can't wait 20 minutes. If Tyler's blood sugar drops while he's in federal custody, that becomes a liability issue for your agency." Neil, Marcus was betting that federal marshals would avoid potential medical liability rather than risk having a diabetic teenager suffer a health crisis on their watch. He was also betting that legitimate federal marshals would know procedures for handling medical emergencies during prisoner transport. The driver pulled over at a rural gas station that appeared to be the only commercial establishment for miles in any direction. Marcus noted that the location provided excellent tactical advantages for anyone planning to make protected witnesses disappear. Isolated, limited surveillance, multiple exit routes. 5 minutes, the passenger marshal said. "Both of you stay where I can maintain visual contact." Marcus and Tyler exited the vehicle and walked toward the gas station restroom, with one marshal maintaining overwatch, while the other remained with the vehicle. Standard security protocol for high-value witness transport, which suggested these men were either legitimate federal agents or very well-trained imposters. Inside the restroom, Marcus quickly briefed Tyler on the situation. "Those men might be legitimate marshals, or they might be working for the people you exposed. Either way, we're not getting back in that vehicle until I can verify our destination through independent channels." Tyler activated the emergency GPS beacon and concealed it in his jacket pocket. "Dad, what if they really are federal agents and we're making a mistake? Then we'll apologize to Agent Reyes and explain our concerns about security protocols. But Tyler, legitimate federal agents don't transport witnesses through areas with no communication coverage, and they don't provide vague descriptions of secure facilities." Marcus checked his watch. The beacon would start broadcasting their location within 60 seconds, sending distress signals to multiple monitoring stations. If these were legitimate marshals, federal agencies would quickly confirm Tyler and Marcus were safe. If not, backup would arrive before their captors could transport them to a secondary location. They exited the restroom to find both marshals waiting outside, with expressions that suggested growing impatience rather than professional concern. "Gentlemen, we need to move," the lead marshal said. "We're behind schedule for the transfer." "Actually, Marshal, I need to make a quick phone call before we continue," Marcus said. "My brother is expecting us to check in, and he'll contact FBI if he doesn't hear from us." It was a test. Legitimate federal marshals would understand that protected witnesses might have family members expecting communication. Criminals posing as federal agents would want to prevent any contact with outside parties. "Sir, communication security protocols prohibit contact with family members during active transport. You can make calls once we reach the secure facility." Marcus felt his suspicions crystallize into certainty. Federal witness protection protocols allowed for supervised communication with immediate family, particularly when witnesses had dependent children or ongoing business obligations. These men were following procedures designed to isolate witnesses rather than protect them. "I understand your concern about security," Marcus said, "but I'm not getting back in that vehicle until I can verify our destination through independent federal channels." The marshals exchanged looks that confirmed Marcus's tactical assessment. These men were preparing to transition from persuasion to force, which meant they were operating outside legitimate federal authority. "Mr. Rivera, I'm ordering you to comply with federal transport protocols. Failure to cooperate will result in additional charges." "What additional charges? My son and I are protected witnesses, not prisoners." "That status can change quickly if you're determined to be uncooperative with federal investigation." Marcus noted that both marshals had adjusted their positions to limit Marcus and Tyler's movement options while maintaining access to their weapons. Professional tactical positioning that suggested military or law enforcement training, but also preparation for confrontation rather than protection. Tyler stayed close to his father while mentally reviewing everything he'd learned about criminal organizations during his investigation. These men were following protocols designed to isolate and control rather than protect and serve. They were criminals with badges, just like Detective Hutchins. The situation was interrupted by the sound of approaching helicopters, multiple aircraft converging on their location with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested emergency response to the GPS beacon Tyler had activated. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, "I think our backup is arriving." Marcus looked skyward and saw 3 helicopters approaching from different directions: FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and what appeared to be military support aircraft. The emergency beacon had done exactly what Marcus had hoped. It had brought multiple agencies to their location simultaneously, making it impossible for any single corrupt official to control the response. The 2 marshals who'd been transporting them suddenly became very interested in their vehicle radio, attempting to coordinate with their supervisors while multiple federal agencies descended on their location. "This is FBI agent Diana Reyes," came a voice from the lead helicopter's loudspeaker. "All personnel on the ground, identify yourselves and your authorization for presence at this location." Marcus waved toward the helicopters while keeping the 2 marshals in his peripheral vision. "Agent Reyes, this is Marcus Rivera. We need immediate verification of transport authorization and destination facility." The helicopters landed in the gas station parking lot with tactical precision, disgorging federal agents who immediately established a security perimeter. Agent Reyes approached Marcus and Tyler while other agents secured the 2 marshals and their vehicle. "Marcus, what happened?" "Transport orders that didn't match standard federal protocols. No communication coverage, vague destination descriptions, and refusal to allow family contact during transport." Reyes studied the 2 marshals as other agents examined their credentials and vehicle authorization. "Tyler, are you all right?" "Yes, ma'am." "But Agent Reyes, Those men were following the same isolation procedures that were used when I was kidnapped. They were trying to take us somewhere without communication or backup. Agent Reyes spoke quietly into her tactical radio before addressing Marcus and Tyler directly. The transport orders were legitimate, issued through proper federal channels. But the destination facility was changed after you left Dallas, and the new location isn't a secure witness protection site. What kind of facility? According to the revised orders, you were being transported to a federal holding facility pending investigation into potential witness tampering and obstruction of justice charges. Marcus felt cold recognition settle in his stomach. Someone with federal authority was trying to reclassify us from protected witnesses to criminal suspects. Deputy Marshal Sarah Morrison issued the revised transport orders 45 minutes ago, claiming new evidence suggested you and Tyler were involved in obstruction of justice related to the trafficking investigation. Tyler looked between his father and Agent Reyes with growing understanding of how systematic corruption could operate within federal agencies. She was trying to make us disappear legally. If we were criminal suspects rather than protected witnesses, our deaths in custody could be explained as escape attempts or resistance to federal authority. Agent Reyes nodded grimly. Tyler, your investigation didn't just expose a trafficking network. You identified corruption that reaches into federal law enforcement oversight. Deputy Marshal Morrison has been using her authority to facilitate criminal operations while officially investigating them. Marcus studied the activity around them, multiple federal agencies coordinating response, the two marshals being processed for credential verification, helicopters maintaining security overwatch. Tyler's research had triggered a federal investigation that was revealing corruption at levels Marcus hadn't imagined possible. What happens now? Full federal protective custody while we complete arrests of everyone involved in this network. Tyler's testimony has given us evidence to prosecute corrupt federal officials, but that also makes you both targets for anyone still operating within the system. Tyler pulled out his notes from months of investigation. Agent Reyes, there's something else. While I was researching this network, I documented connections to missing persons cases in other states. This isn't just about our local area. This is a national operation using federal resources. Agent Reyes accepted Tyler's notes and immediately began reviewing them with other FBI agents. What Tyler had uncovered through academic research was providing evidence for a federal investigation that would likely span multiple states and involve dozens of arrests. Tyler, you may have just provided evidence for one of the largest federal corruption cases in recent history. Marcus looked at his 16-year-old son and saw not just a teenager who'd survived kidnapping, but a young investigator who'd exposed systematic corruption that had been operating undetected for years. Tyler had honored his mother's memory by ensuring that other families wouldn't experience the same loss. But the investigation was far from over. Somewhere in federal law enforcement, Deputy Marshal Sarah Morrison was realizing that her carefully constructed criminal empire was collapsing around the testimony and research of a teenager who'd refused to disappear quietly, and Marcus Rivera was beginning to understand that protecting his son meant more than just bringing him home safely. It meant ensuring that the people who'd killed Elena and tried to eliminate Tyler would face justice through the very federal system they'd corrupted for their own purposes. The cleanup was just beginning. 6 months later, Federal Courthouse, Dallas, Texas. The gavel fell with the finality that Marcus Rivera had been waiting to hear for 9 months. Judge Patricia Williams looked down from the federal bench with the stern expression of someone who'd spent 30 years ensuring that justice was served regardless of the defendant's position or authority. Deputy United States Marshal Sarah Morrison, you have been found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit human trafficking, murder in the first degree, obstruction of justice, and corruption of federal law enforcement. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Marcus sat in the gallery next to Tyler, watching as the woman who had killed his wife and tried to eliminate his son was led away in shackles. Morrison had maintained her composure throughout the 6-week trial, even when faced with overwhelming evidence of her criminal enterprise. But as the bailiff secured her restraints, Marcus saw something break in Morrison's expression, the final recognition that her carefully constructed double life had collapsed completely. Tyler had been the prosecution's star witness, providing testimony that connected Morrison's federal authority to the trafficking network that had operated across 4 states for nearly 5 years. The 16-year-old had testified with the same methodical precision he'd used in his original research, walking federal prosecutors through months of investigation that had uncovered patterns professional agents had missed. Tyler Rivera's investigation and testimony directly led to the conviction of 17 individuals involved in this trafficking network. U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez had told the media after the verdict, "This young man's courage and analytical skills have saved dozens of children and exposed corruption at the highest levels of federal law enforcement." But the courthouse victory was only part of the cleanup that had consumed Marcus and Tyler's lives since that night at the rural gas station. Morrison's conviction was the capstone of a federal investigation that had revealed corruption reaching into multiple agencies and spanning several states. Detective Raymond Hutchins had pleaded guilty to his role in the trafficking network in exchange for testimony against Morrison and other federal officials. He was serving 25 years in federal prison, his law enforcement career destroyed and his family relocated under assumed names after receiving death threats from criminal associates who blamed Hutchins for the network's exposure. The 6 other individuals arrested during the initial FBI raid had received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. Most had provided additional testimony about the scope of Morrison's operation, revealing financial networks and transportation systems that federal agents were still investigating. Marcus and Tyler had spent months in federal protective custody while prosecutors built their cases. Tyler had missed most of his junior year of high school, instead receiving private tutoring while providing testimony to federal grand juries in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and New Mexico. The boy who'd started the year worried about passing AP history had become a key federal witness in one of the largest corruption cases in recent FBI history. Outside the federal courthouse, "How does it feel?" asked the reporter from Channel 8 News, one of dozens of media representatives covering Morrison's sentencing. Tyler had agreed to a brief press conference at the urging of federal prosecutors who wanted to highlight the role of citizen investigation in exposing criminal corruption. "It feels like justice for my mom," Tyler said, standing between his father and Agent Diana Reyes on the courthouse steps. Elena Rivera died trying to protect vulnerable children from people who were supposed to be protecting them. This verdict means her sacrifice wasn't meaningless. Marcus watched his son handle media attention with the same composure Tyler had shown throughout the investigation and trial. 9 months of federal protection and legal proceedings had changed Tyler in fundamental ways. The boy was more serious now, more aware of how evil could hide behind official authority, but also more confident in his ability to fight back against injustice. "Mr. Rivera," called another reporter, "what's next for your family?" Marcus considered the question carefully. They'd received offers to relocate anywhere in the country under federal witness protection programs. Tyler had been accepted to several prestigious universities based on his investigative work and academic record. Publishers and movie producers had contacted them about book and film rights to their story. But Marcus had made his decision months ago during one of their conversations in federal protective custody. "We're going home," Marcus said. "Tyler's finishing high school where he started, and I'm reopening Rivera's garage. We've received enough offers to start over somewhere else, but our community needs to heal from what happened, and we want to be part of that healing. Won't you be concerned about your safety? Some of Morrison's criminal associates are still unaccounted for. Agent Reyes stepped forward to answer that question. The FBI continues to monitor threats against the Rivera family, and we maintain ongoing protective protocols as needed. But Tyler and Marcus have made it clear that they won't be driven from their home by criminals who can no longer operate with federal protection. Tyler added his own perspective. Running away would mean the people who killed my mother succeeded in destroying our family. We're not giving them that victory. 3 weeks later, Rivera's garage. Marcus wiped his hands on a familiar oil-stained rag and checked the wall clock that had marked Elena's time in the garage office for so many years. At 3:15 p.m., Tyler would be walking home from school soon, following the same route he'd taken the day this whole nightmare began. But Tyler's routine was different now. The boy carried a federal emergency communicator that could summon FBI response within minutes. Tyler had completed advanced self-defense training during their months in protective custody. Most importantly, Tyler walked home now with the knowledge that he'd successfully fought back against people who'd thought a 16-year-old couldn't threaten their criminal empire. The garage had reopened 2 weeks ago, though Marcus had made significant security improvements. Surveillance cameras monitored all approaches to the building. The office safe now contained copies of all federal documents related to Morrison's prosecution, along with detailed records of the trafficking network Tyler had exposed. Marcus had learned that physical evidence was worthless if it could be destroyed by corrupt authorities. Now everything was backed up through multiple federal agencies and stored in locations that couldn't be compromised by local corruption. Business had been better than expected. The media attention surrounding Tyler's investigation had brought national recognition to Rivera's garage, but more importantly, it had brought community support from people who understood that Marcus and Tyler had risked everything to protect other families from the same tragedy they'd experienced. Tyler's afternoon routine now included an hour at the garage before heading home to homework and the ongoing federal interviews that continued as prosecutors built cases against Morrison's remaining associates. Tyler had become something of a local celebrity, the teenager who'd taken down federal corruption through methodical research and determined investigation. But Marcus could see that the experience had changed Tyler in ways that went beyond media attention and academic recognition. His son was more careful now, more analytical about trusting authority figures, more aware of how systematic evil could hide behind legitimate institutions. Tyler had lost some of the innocent confidence that teenagers were supposed to possess, replaced by the hard-earned wisdom that came from successfully fighting back against people who'd seemed untouchable. "Dad?" Tyler's voice interrupted Marcus's thoughts as the boy arrived for his usual after-school visit. Agent Reyes called. They arrested 3 more people connected to Morrison's network, including a federal prosecutor who was blocking investigations in New Mexico. Marcus felt satisfaction rather than surprise. Tyler's research had identified patterns that federal agents were still following, leading to arrests and convictions that continued to dismantle the network Morrison had spent years building. How many does that make? 24 people convicted or awaiting trial. But Agent Reyes says they're still investigating connections to other federal programs that might have been compromised. Tyler pulled out a manila folder filled with college application materials. Despite everything that had happened, the boy was still planning for his future with the same methodical approach he'd used to expose Morrison's operation. "Have you decided where you want to go to school?" "I've been thinking about it. Georgetown has a good criminal justice program, and being in Washington would let me stay connected to the federal investigations that are still ongoing. But Dad, I don't want to leave if you need help with the garage." Marcus looked at his son and saw Elena's determination combined with his own analytical precision. Tyler had the intelligence and courage to pursue any career he chose, but Marcus also understood that the boy felt responsible for continuing the fight against corruption they'd started together. "Tyler, you've already done more to fight injustice than most people accomplish in a lifetime. Your job now is to build whatever life will make you happy. What if what makes me happy is making sure people like Morrison can't hurt other families? It was a question Marcus had expected for months. Tyler had discovered that he had a talent for investigation and a passion for protecting vulnerable people from systematic abuse. The boy who'd started the year planning to study engineering was now considering a career in federal law enforcement or prosecutorial work. Then you pursue that, but you do it on your own terms. You don't let what happened to our family define the rest of your life. Tyler nodded, though Marcus could see the boy was still processing the scope of how their experience would shape his future choices. 6 months later, graduation day. Marcus stood in the parking lot of Westbrook High School, watching Tyler receive his diploma with highest honors and recognition as the school's most distinguished graduate. The same building where Tyler had been targeted by predators was now celebrating him as a hero whose investigation had saved dozens of other children from similar fates. Tyler had been accepted to Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, where he planned to study international criminal justice with a focus on human trafficking networks. Agent Reyes had arranged internship opportunities with the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force, allowing Tyler to continue working on cases related to the Morrison investigation while pursuing his education. The boy who'd started his investigation to honor his mother's memory was now planning a career dedicated to protecting other families from the same systematic evil they'd encountered. "Mr. Rivera?" Marcus turned to find Mrs. Patricia Donnelly approaching, the English teacher whose phone call had started this entire ordeal 9 months earlier. She looked older now, more serious, but also somehow more determined. "Mrs. Donnelly, how are you doing?" "Better, now that justice has been served. But Mr. Rivera, I wanted to tell you something. Tyler's investigation changed how our school handles missing student cases. We now have direct federal reporting protocols that bypass local law enforcement when students disappear under suspicious circumstances." Marcus felt a sense of completion at that information. Tyler's research hadn't just led to criminal prosecutions, it had created systematic changes that would protect other children from falling victim to similar networks. Tyler will be glad to hear that. "Mr. Rivera, what Tyler accomplished required remarkable courage and intelligence. But it also required a father who believed in him and supported his investigation even when it became dangerous. Elena would be proud of both of you." Marcus watched Tyler pose for photographs with federal prosecutors and FBI agents who'd become something like extended family over the past months. His son was planning a life dedicated to ensuring that other families wouldn't experience the tragedy that had torn their world apart. Tyler Rivera had started his senior year as a high school student, worried about college applications and academic performance. He was finishing it as a federal witness whose investigation had dismantled a multi-state trafficking network and exposed corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement. Elena Rivera had died trying to protect vulnerable children from systematic abuse. Her son had honored that sacrifice by ensuring the people responsible for her death would never hurt another family. Marcus Rivera had started this ordeal as a mechanic whose biggest concern was providing for his son's education. He was ending it as a father whose child had proven that individual citizens could successfully fight back against corruption that seemed insurmountable. The GPS trail that had led Marcus to Tyler's captors had ultimately led to justice for Elena and protection for dozens of other families who would never know their names. But Marcus knew Elena's name. Tyler knew Elena's name. And somewhere in federal witness protection, 17 other families knew Elena's name because her son had refused to let her death be meaningless. The verdict was justice. The cleanup was protection. The final outcome was the kind of legacy that Elena Rivera would have chosen for herself, a world where vulnerable children were safer because her family had refused to accept that evil could operate with impunity. Marcus Rivera locked up his garage at the end of another ordinary day, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to build the kind of life Elena had envisioned for their family. Tyler Rivera was planning a career dedicated to ensuring that other families would never experience the tragedy that had once threatened to destroy everything Marcus held dear. The GPS trail had led them home. Justice had been served. The fight continued. And in a small Texas town, where 17 teenagers had once disappeared without meaningful investigation, children now walked home from school under the protection of federal protocols created by a 16-year-old boy who'd refused to let his mother's murder go unpunished.